Ahead on Straight Talk, another long legislative session in Salem comes to a close.
I declare that the 2025 regular session of the 83rd Legislative Assembly is adjourned sine die.
Over an intense 5 months, lawmakers addressed some of the issues that matter most to Oregonians.
It means we can have confidence we go into an emergency situation in our place where we get medical care,
while leaving others still on the table.
It was too big, it was too complicated, and I think that's what at the end of the day ran the calendar out.
We sit down with Senate leaders from both parties to talk everything from healthcare policy to the lack of a transportation package.
We're talking about an agency that needed a few $100 million to balance, and their response was a $12 billion transportation tax.
Right now on Straight Talk. Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Tim Gordon in for Stephanie Domerat. In the last few weeks, the Oregon legislature called the 2025 long session to an end. The session was largely dominated by a few key topics, not the least of which is a failed package intended to fund transportation projects across the state. Joining us to recap this chaotic legislative session is Democratic Senator Winsve Campos. Senator Campos represents Senate District 18, covering Aloha, parts of Beaverton, Hillsborough as well, and part of the Chehalem Mountains, too. Senator Campos serves as a Senate Deputy Majority Leader and co-chairs the Joint Emergency Board Interim Subcommittee on Human Services. That's a mouthful, a lot going on there. Also joining us is Republican Senator Daniel Bonham. Senator Bonham represents Senate District 26, which covers the area between Gresham and all the way out the Dalles to in the Gorge. Senator Bonham also serves as a Senate Minority Leader and has a seat on the Joint Emergency Board Interim Subcommittee on Public Safety. Senator Campos, Senator Bonham, thank you for taking the time to join us here on Straight Talk today and talk about the session.
Thank you.
Thank you for
All right,
having us.
and we will get started, starting with something kind of light. We want you to grade the session, thinking about kind of the issues that you went into the session, one to achieve success with, looking at past sessions. How'd this one rate? And I'll start with you, Senator Bonham. Give it a grade.
I give it a B. At the end of the day, I think we did pass budgets, which is our constitutional obligation, and for the most part, we did no harm. There were a lot of things that were on the table that could have been done at a time when most Oregonians are saying, I can't afford the cost of living here in Oregon. We were able to stop taxes. We were able to keep things affordable for now. And were no major policy disasters this session. So
seems like a pretty good grade, a B for the minority party.
Yeah.
Yep. Senator Campos, how about you? What would you grade the session 2025?
Well, I would give it B plus, A minus. We were able to get a lot of our priorities across the line, making sure that we were focusing on affordability, on protecting critical services, on public safety, a lot of the things that we know that Oregonians care about. But we certainly left a pretty big package on the table. We did not get that across the finish line, and that's certainly a disappointment for a number of us.
And I know you talk about transportation. We're going to get right to the issues and talk about that right now. Yeah, that transportation funding package, this was a top priority for Democrats to do something really big here. A lot of early bipartisan work, too, over the last couple of years to kind of hear from Oregonians on it. But Democratic leadership waited until the last 3 weeks to introduce House Bill 2025. It didn't fly. Now, as it stands, 500 layoffs at ODOT and 200 more to come next year if nothing changes. Senator Campos, it seems like a pretty big failure for Democrats with a supermajority not to get this done. Why did that happen?
Well, it's absolutely unacceptable that we're at this point in time where we're seeing these layoffs, and we know that there's a good amount of work that we have to get done. My understanding of this is that a package this large requires a lot of engagement, a lot of conversations, a lot of stakeholders at the table. And I know that those conversations were going on throughout session, but as we have seen in the past when we have tried to pass a package like this, I believe it was 2015, we looked at passing a transportation package. That didn't happen in 2015. We did come back in 2017 and get that done. These sorts of packages take time, a lot of conversations, and we're looking forward to the amount of work that we know needs to happen to make sure that we are investing in good roads, in bridges, and making sure that folks can get to work, get to school safely.
But to not get it done this time, there are layoffs now. I mean, this may be phase one, maybe it'll come later, but are you disappointed, or should you have started sooner?
Well, I know that this is a conversation that has been going on for a good amount of time. We know that there were road shows that happened across the state of Oregon to get input from folks throughout the state. I think that we have a lot of disappointment, a lot of frustration of where we landed. We did try and have a stopgap bill at the very end that also failed, and that was to mitigate that impact when it comes to layoffs. And so, as I noted, we have more work, and we're ready to get that done.
Okay. Well, Senator Bonham, the governor is indicating there may be a special session coming. We may know by the time this airs whether that's the case or not. You're meeting with her later today. That's news we're just breaking here.
Right.
Tell us what you think. I mean, where did this fall apart, and what were you were hoping for something different anyway, but and talk about the prospect of a special session.
Yeah, I think going back to the genesis of the conversation about having a transportation package really did start in the interim coming out of the 24 session. And the roadshow that took place was half-hearted. There were hexagons on a screen of a PowerPoint presentation that said things like road use charge. They said things like fuel tax, registration fees, licensing fees, all tolling was on there. Like they had all these different hexagons, but they didn't actually quantify what that dollar value would be. So we went out and we told the public we need $3 billion. Here's all the different ways we could get it, but we never told them 15 cents per gallon. 10 cents a mile on a road use charge. Like we couldn't quantify it for them, so no one had the opportunity to push back because they couldn't quantify what it meant for them. No one understands what $3 billion is. To put in perspective, our state budget for this biennium is $140 billion. So that's $33,000, 333 cents per man, woman, and child that lives in Oregon today. 4.2 million people live here, 140 billion, that's a ton of money to be spent every 2 years per person, and yet we're saying we don't have enough money for transportation. So Republicans did put forward a package that said we can reprioritize money from the 2017 package, we can reprioritize named projects to put them back into core service operations and maintenance. We went to ODOT. We said, what are the things that the legislature's asked you to do that aren't core function? They gave us a list. So we incorporated those things into a bill that said we can continue to provide the service. We don't have to make any cuts. We were absolutely clear that our plan that we put forward as a transportation package preserved those jobs. Those jobs, whether it was SEIU or AEE, those labor union jobs are the frontline jobs that we care about, that do the service, that provide the maintenance, that keep the roads safe. We wanted to protect those jobs more than anybody did, and yet our plan continuously was rejected, and all the answer could be was we need $15 billion in new tax.
Right. Briefly, if there is a special session, would you support a 3-cent a gallon gas tax to get those employees and keep the standard?
I mean, not without a conversation. We have things that are driving cost. We have things like the project labor agreements, we have advanced clean trucks, we have electric vehicle mandates, we have a climate protection program that's siphoning off fuel tax into other areas. So until you get those things back to the trust fund and get them back to core service, I'm not going to talk about a new tax period until we talk about the cost drivers and better efficiency and accountability within ODOT.
Okay. More to come on this. I know we spent a lot of time on it because it's an important issue, but we're going to move on a little more quickly now. But we're going to talk about wildfire funding now. Another big issue. The need is here right now. The season is underway, the wildfire season. The state looking for a more stable way to pay for prevention and suppression. Some big ideas floated to try and get around $300 million per biennium for it. In the end, a bill passed to tax oral nicotine patches and take some interest earnings from the rainy day fund, but that's expected to raise, well, less than $45 million a year. Senator Bonham, you voted against it. Tell us why and what needs to happen to get fire funding going.
Again, this is the one thing that the governor actually told us that she prioritized. I met with her early in session. I kept asking about transportation, other things. She said, the one thing I need is wildfire funding. And early in session, we had a plan of about 7 different options that were put forward. We had pretty broad consensus around 3 ideas: using ending fund balance, using a tax called the retaliatory tax, and using interest from the rainy day fund. That money would have been sufficient, would have been about that $300 million that you're talking about. And instead, they came back and said, well, we can't do it without incorporating a new tax. They wanted to originally, the governor wanted to steal money from the bottle bill. She wanted to steal some money from how we fund the recycling program, and wanted to put it towards Wildfire. I don't know what the nexus is there, but that was her plan. And then they came up with this Zinn tax, and the only nexus I can get from Zinn and Wildfire is that the firefighters use a lot of Zinn as they do their work. But traditionally, we use nicotine, we use tobacco taxes to fund healthcare. So it was an interesting thing that we were using that mechanism to fund wildfire funding. That said, we came into agreement on it, but they would only limit the rainy day interest to that tax. So instead of another $170 million, they were only going to give us 30. And that limiting factor was what led to my opposition. We know we have this massive need, and yet we're underfunding it continuously.
So it was more about that than the nicotine pouches?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Senator Campos, you voted for it, obviously. How much more would you have supported? Would you have supported the governor's $1 billion idea about the kicker fund paying?
Well, I would say that this conversation goes to one of the priorities that we need to look at in the legislature. It's revenue, right? Certainly what we passed was not enough for what we know the need is. And I would, this ties a little bit to the conversation that we just had around transportation. I would say that with what we were putting forward with the big transportation package, we were looking at different streams of revenue that we know are necessary for the care of our communities. And so I actually think the way that we went about it with the Zinn tax does relate to healthcare, right? Because clean air is so important to our communities. And I believe that we have put forth with this, but also with the transportation package, recognizing a need to support clean air, to support transit, make sure that we are supporting Oregonians in their everyday lives.
Okay, well, it'll be interesting to see how wildfire funding gets paid this time. We're going to have to go back and pay the bill sometime in the future because obviously not enough got done. We're going to take a quick break and get back to more questions with Senator Bonham and Senator Campos when we come back. Stay with us. And welcome back to Straight Talk. Thanks so much for joining us. We are continuing our conversation with Republican Senator Bonham and Democratic Senator Campos. Senators, thanks so much again for being here with us today on Straight Talk. And now we're going to get to Governor Kotek's stated big priorities coming into this session, the 2025 session, where we can start with education. And paying for K-12 education, obviously, it's something that's heavily debated, but everyone seems to see Oregon struggling, really pandemic and post-pandemic now, with test scores, graduation rates, and more. A new accountability system did pass, but not with as much funding as many wanted for struggling students especially. Senator Campos, how do you see this one?
Well, thank you for that question. I'm very proud that we were able to put forth some accountability measures this time around. We have been hearing a number of questions coming in around that, and we certainly want to see outcomes. When it comes to funding, I will say that this was a challenging session when we were looking at the budget. Everything that was going on at the federal level certainly impacted the revenue forecast that we ended up having to work with, and there were a number of things that we wanted to make more investments in, but we are proud that we were able to put a historic investment in education this past session.
Terrific. And Senator Bonham, Republicans obviously have been pretty critical about bang for the buck in education in the state of Oregon. What solutions were you hoping to accomplish this session?
Well, I think the accountability measure falls short. Like, I thought we would have loved to have seen some restoration of graduation standards. We would have loved to have seen some accountability built into that. The fact of the matter is, though, that is significant investment that didn't come from a new tax. We were thrilled to see the state of Oregon step up and prioritize education funding without holding it hostage. That's the first time that's happened in quite some time.
Okay, so maybe a B+ and a B- there.
There you go.
We'll
There you go.
grade it. All right. Mental health funding now, and some big moves here with $65 million approved for residential treatment centers, and also some legislation that makes it harder for cities to use zoning laws to prevent those from going in. And an answer really connected to the big debate over forced mental health treatment with HB 2005 got one Republican vote in the Senate. And Senator Bonham, it was not yours. You voted no. Tell us why.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, there were supersiding authority that we're given, where we're going to allow the governor and an agency to decide where they're going to build. They're going to bypass every other land use consideration that we have, and we're going to let these agencies have more power and authority. And I think if you look at a lot of my no votes, it has to do with when we're giving an agency that's already run amok more power, more authority. And I don't think people are going to appreciate this agency having superseding authority of where they put mental health capacity.
All right. Senator Campos, Democrats were united on this, and particularly the civil rights issue around mental health illness and being committed. How do you feel about that part of it? Was there a trade-off there in terms of civil rights?
Well, so we have heard from our communities, from the constituents we represent, the need for investment in mental health, in behavioral health. When we talk about the issues that we know are priorities to our communities, so housing and homelessness.
Yes. Oh, that's okay. We're going to move on to housing and homelessness. if you'd like.
So when we talk about housing and homelessness and healthcare and public safety, those sorts of investments are critical to make sure that we are getting folks the access to mental health that they need. And so that was something that we prioritized this session.
No, and it totally makes sense. A lot of mental health issues are for people who are houseless, they're on the streets, and they're suffering greatly. So I get the connection for sure. And we can talk about that now. Billions have been spent on housing and homelessness. The governor wanted to spend a lot more, had big plans for that. Then that downsized revenue forecast kind of put the crimp on a little bit of that. But are we on the right track, Senator Bonham, or how do you see this issue?
We're spending a lot of money on housing, and I don't believe you can house your way out of homelessness. I don't think any state in the nation, any jurisdiction in the nation has been able to do that. You do have to start with the care and the treatment, and you have to get people into a good place. They can't just be provided a place to live without the tools to stay there. And a lot of that does come back to the economic environment, job creation. It does start with some clean and sober, mentally well people. So we need to invest in that. We need to invest in treatment. The ballot measure 110 that we ultimately overturned and did recriminalize drug possession. But the one thing that the voters were clear about is that they wanted investment in drug treatment. They wanted investment in behavioral health. So I do think that this is finally responsive to that. But at the same time, we're still spending a lot of money on the housing side that could be spent actually getting people into a good place to where they can stay in that house stabilized.
Okay, thanks very much. I think we've got time to talk about public defenders too, and this is something our team here at KGW has covered quite a lot. The lack of public defenders for those who need them so bad. It's a constitutional crisis in the state of Oregon. You all put nearly 15% more funding for public defenders to get more on board. And this was bipartisan. You both voted for it. Most everyone did. How does that feel, Senator Campos?
We're excited to see what's to come. We're also excited about the new leadership at the helm of that agency. This goes to some of what Senator Bonham was mentioning here around workforce, making more investments in the workforce and folks that we know are providing critical services to make sure that folks have access to their constitutional rights and freedoms is so important, and we're going to continue to keep an eye on that to make sure that folks are getting access to those services.
What do you think about this, Senator Bonham? Beyond that, some other structural pieces of this that make it work?
So the word that's resonated with me, though, is the constitutional requirement, right? And so not to harp on transportation too much, but we had a constitutional requirement to balance the highway cost allocation study. Truckers are paying more than their fair share according to what the Constitution obligates us to do. There's supposed to be a balance between light and heavy vehicles. We're supposed to spend fuel tax only on the Highway Trust Fund, and yet the Climate Protection Program is going to use fuel tax in the name of a carbon tax and divert those funds from the Highway Trust Fund, making it more likely that we will face more challenges with staffing at ODOT. Like the operations and maintenance things that come are because we are no longer following the Constitution. And so constitutionality on one thing is great. Like, I'm glad that we're giving people the right to a public defense. That is something that they're constitutionally promised. We need to do the same thing with our commitment to transportation funding. We need to do the same thing with natural gas taxes. They cannot be diverted from the school fund. The Common School Fund is where natural gas taxes go, and yet we're going to promise them through a climate protection program that Governor Brown put into place and Governor Kotek is continuing to divert those funds to a nonprofit seeking justice and allow them to use those funds for other things than the Common School Fund and the Highway Trust Fund. And so the Constitution should always prevail. That's what we're there. It's the first thing we swear to do, is to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of Oregon. And we need to get back to that in all aspects, not just when it suits our political purpose.
And Senator Campos, we have some time for you to respond to that as well. What's your take on that? Is that right? Are we breaking the Constitution in a number of levels here?
I would say that we clearly have different perspectives on the transportation package. And I touched a little bit on this when I talked about it earlier, that when we put forward a transportation package, we made sure that we were prioritizing things that folks don't see as a privilege or a luxury, right? Making sure that folks have access, have services, that the bus comes around when they need it to, that they're able to go out and breathe clean air, and that they can think of their kids in the future being able to have access to that air, to the beautiful environment that we have here in Oregon. What I will say is that certainly the cost of not moving forward is high. We intend to get work done. We know that there are layoffs that are happening, that there may be more to come if nothing goes on. And there were certainly criticisms about the cost of the package that Democrats put forward. But the cost of not funding, say you are a mom, you're a single parent, you're getting your child ready for the day. The child doesn't want to put on, their jacket. The mom has to deal with this. Suddenly they're running late. They're going on the 57 out in Aloha. They miss the bus, and because we didn't fund transit enough, that service lines were going to be cut back, which is our understanding of what was put forth in the Republicans' package, was that a number of services would have had to be cut. So if somebody misses that school bus, their child misses a day, could very possibly miss a day of school because the bus doesn't come around again for several hours, or they may miss a day of work. And so there's more work to be done. There's a number of things that pass in the legislature with bipartisan support. 93% of the work that we do in that building, you can look at the bills, make it through with bipartisan support. Clearly, there are some differences here when it comes to the transportation package, but we do hope to get to a space where we have Republican support on what we ultimately do.
Okay, different perspectives, good points, appreciate that. Finally, can you recall a moment, maybe more than a moment of unity this past session that kind of impressed you, whether it was with an individual legislator from the other side or in a group effort to get something passed? Senator Bonham, I'll start with you. What comes to mind?
Honoring Peter Courtney. Broad bipartisan support for a legend in the building. I wore on multiple days my khaki pants, my blue shoes, and at the end, Margie had offered some ties to the legislature, and so I picked out a Peter Courtney tie, and on the last day of session, I wore that. But it was a unique time and space to honor him and to reflect on his impact on the state of Oregon.
Great statesman, for sure. Thank you for that. And Senator Campos?
Well, it was a hard session for a number of reasons, but I would say the friendships that we do end up creating in that building, right, and the hard moments that we end up going through, whether it's with the loss of a former colleague, the loss of a current colleague, or even in just our day-to-day interactions. I would say that we maintain a relatively good environment in the building, and I know folks see what's going on at the federal level and that there's a good amount of vitriol, and I'm proud to say that we can sit here next to one another and genuinely say that we respect one another as
fellow
colleagues.
Timbers fans.
As fellow Timbers
There you go.
fans.
But losing Aaron Woods was a big thing as well. Like, We lost a colleague during our time together. But there are genuine friendships. And again, despite the partisan differences, we are humans and we do connect.
And we see it right here today. We thank you so much for joining us today. Very much.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for watching. I want to let you know I'll be in for Stephanie again next week as well, but we have a great conversation planned around one of the most hot button topics across the country right now, and that's immigration. A reminder that you can stream Straight Talk on your own schedule. Download the free KGW Plus app